I spent 8 years in Silicon Valley working at a bunch of different companies. So I was tech lead at Course Hero, Instagram, and Robinhood. Course Hero rebranded to like Learneo like about a year ago. But they're huge. They raised that 3.6 billion during COVID, so really proud of them. And I had a pretty kind of typical like job stints across my career, and that across 8 years, I worked for four different companies. So in Silicon Valley, the average amount of time you spend per company is between 1.5 to 2 years, and I pretty much average exactly 2 years. And yeah, across my career and especially now, I have coached thousands of engineers to get job offers that they're happy with. At top tech companies, I've gotten a lot of engineers into Fang and cutting edge startups as well. And I've been around the block when it comes to job candidates. I've helped both from traditional and non-traditional backgrounds. I even got a software engineer. She didn't even have a computer science degree, and I got her a job at Workday, which I think is an incredible company to start your career off at, especially if you don't even have a computer science degree. So I was very proud of that. So yeah, moving on to kind of more of like why, I personally think I'm qualified to kind of teach this material is job switching. I've done multiple job switches, as you can see, four different companies across 8 different years. I'm happy to say that each job switch I made came with a very large increase in compensation. So I graduated UCLA 2014, went to PayPal as a new grad. I was making about $85,000. And fast forward 7 years to 2021, I was a high performing tech lead at Robinhood making $750,000. So it's not exactly plus 800%. I did the math. It's like plus 770% or plus 780% or something. But plus 800% TC growth across 7 years, pretty good. So I'm fortunate enough to have been rewarded for my skills across my career, and a lot of that was just because I got pretty good at doing interviews. Rahul, take it away.
Yeah. Okay. I'm Rahul. I primarily have worked at two companies, the ones that I've bolded here, Pinterest for a couple of years and then Facebook after that. But throughout my career, I have gotten offers from a lot more. Google, I just listed a couple here. Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Uber, Stripe, Airbnb, Twitter, pre-Elon. I feel like it's worth mentioning pre-Elon now. Walmart, so a wide range of companies. And I think one thing also worth calling out is I also got rejected from, I think, almost all these companies. So I've actually applied to many companies. I think I applied to Google like 3 times before I got in, Facebook 4 times before I got in. And so, when people are talking about their intro, they typically talk about the highlights, what went well, what worked. But you don't hear about all the failures. And so I wanted to make sure I verbally call that out too, that I have failed many, many interviews as well. So 2017 to 2022, I was a tech lead and manager at Meta. And then before that, I was at Pinterest, where I primarily worked on Android. And I'll just go through a couple of why I learned a lot. And I think I got to a point where I was relatively good at interviews. Is when I was at Pinterest, I actually got a senior level offer as a mid-level engineer, which it's not unheard of, but it's definitely rare. And I think that you can do that only if you have leverage, number one. And number two, your actual interview performance has to meet the bar of a senior engineer. And so we'll talk about, some of that today. Personally, I have actually negotiated $400,000 roughly. I mean, it's hard to say because stock increases and, you know, like it was like a verbal offer, but it wasn't written down yet because recruiters play that tactic. But personally, I have seen $400,000 of compensation increase by negotiating really effectively because I was in a position where I had multiple offers. And then one more achievement. So Alex, have you heard that joke where how do you know if someone is vegan? You just wait 5 minutes and then they'll tell you. So
Yeah, yeah, that's a famous one.
I'm the same way with pickleball. So how do you know I play pickleball? Just give me 5 minutes and then it'll come up in conversation because like I play pickleball so much. And so that's the other achievement I wanted to call out here, which is that I play pickleball a couple times a week here in the Bay Area. Both Alex and I are in the Bay, and I've won a couple competitions. And there's no pickleball emoji, unfortunately, so I had to include the tennis ball and ping pong. Okay, and then I want to do the same thing that Alex did. So Here's time on the x-axis and then compensation on the y-axis. I was at Stanford for 5 years before I entered the industry. So in 2014, I joined as a founding engineer at a tiny startup that a professor of mine started. I was getting paid $110,000. Um, During my peak earning year, which is 2021, I made 825K at Meta, which is an increase of roughly 650%. And of course, both for Alex and I, we benefited from Robinhood and Meta stock doing really well, right? So I mean, it's not just purely like, oh, we got an offer at that level. There is some stock appreciation, but still, fundamentally, we were valued by the company at a higher level and being paid a lot more. And that's one thing that I'm hoping you all can take away is that interviewing, if done well, can be extremely high leverage. And so the skill, the ability to get good at interviewing at a tech company is also extremely high leverage. And we're going to share a bunch of things that we've learned over the past 20 collective years of wisdom, of experience, and hope to share that with you. Okay, so with that, Alex, I will let you start off. We have three different topics we're going to cover today. Alex, I'll let you start with topic number one, which is how to organize your job search.
Yeah, and it's only three topics. It seems low, but what Rahul and I, want to do is we want to cover each one in depth. And if you want to get extremely good at something, you have to go deep, and especially in this market. Like if you're not getting really, really good at each of the individual skills, then you're not going to survive. And this one, I think, is a really big one where in the prior economy, when it was like 0% interest rates and everything was good, you didn't really have to do this. Like you could be lazy, but if there's one message Rahul and I want to get across, given this job market, is you cannot be lazy. Like if you are lazy with your job search, you're just going to get weeded out so fast. So let's go through how to organize your job search. We have this kind of classic South Park meme, phase one, phase two, question mark, phase three. It's kind of similar, but it's actually kind of simple conceptually, but a lot of people don't really factor this in. So yeah, let's go back to the steps. Here are the steps to get an awesome job offer. Step one, get interviews. Step two, pass interviews. Genius, right? And all of you in this call are probably like, well, duh, that makes sense. But what I have found with an overwhelming majority of job candidates, especially those who are struggling, have not properly internalized this process. And let's move on and let's dig into why. The core insight here is that depending on what step you are within that two-step process, your life is going to be very different. And in particular, what you have to do to prepare and strengthen your portfolio are very, very different. So there is no set routine you can just run through every day to get a really nice tech job. Everyone wants that, right? Like everyone's like, okay, if I just do 4 hours of lead code a day, I do this specific like list of problems, I do 2 hour system design, I just rinse and repeat, and then I'll have an offer from Fang. Everyone wants that super predictable step-by-step process that they can just follow and just automatically get the result they want. But it's just not the case, especially in this market. You have to be extremely dynamic. You need to be constantly adapting and shifting how you spend your time and how you prioritize what you do, depending on where you are in this process. So when it comes to succeeding as a interview candidate, you need to always identify where you're struggling and act accordingly. And this is just how growth works as a human. You should always be introspecting and being like, all right, what's the situation? How has it changed since the prior week, since the prior month? And what do I need to adapt? Like what gaps of mine do I need to patch up in order to move on to the next step of the journey? So concretely, when it comes to the grind, and then we can move on to this very beautiful meme I put together. So you're back on the job market. You're like, all right, I'm gonna get good at lead code. I'm gonna grind DSA, and then you just grind lead code. You just grind lead code, and like nothing happens. And it is surprising to me how many engineers do this. Like they essentially equate interview preparation and getting offers with doing lead code. And this is kind of like a relic of the old economy, because in the old economy, especially if you lived in North America or like in London or something, and you had a couple years of experience, or even if you're like a new grad or coming from a top school, you could probably get a job interview opportunity at Google or Amazon, right? Like those companies were hiring like crazy in 2021 and earlier. So if you just kind of did lead code optimistically, there was a very high chance that it would be useful for you at some point during a job search. This is not the case now. Fang is hiring again, but really not that much. The bar is much higher to even get a phone screen. So given that, a lot of this like kind of DSA knowledge is actually not that useful because it's the big tech companies who are overwhelmingly asking these like leak code questions, right? A lot of the companies hiring nowadays are not Fang. They're either like big non-tech companies or they're startups. And yeah, those companies can ask leak code too, but it's not going to be as much leak code as like Google, for example, which is notorious for just having a ton of DSA on their interviews. Pretty much like all L3s and L4s, junior and mid levels, like their interview is like 80 to 90% DSA. And you're not going to run into that this much, if you're not getting Fang interviews in this economy.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah.
I'll add one thing here. One way to frame it is that this is the constant trade-off that we all make between short-term and long-term gratification, because it might sound weird to say it, but I think solving leak code is short-term gratification. Like it feels good to get the green check mark on leak code and like, oh, I got the correct answer. It's very concrete. I got it correct or not. But I think the thing that Alex and I have seen again and again and again from talking to hundreds of people is that they're so myopically focused on the short-term good feeling of getting a good leak code, of answering a leak code question correctly, that they forget that there's so much work surrounding that it is going to be a little bit more uncomfortable, perhaps, and a bit more ambiguous what to do, like networking, sending out cold messages, framing your interview prep. But that work is actually as essential, or perhaps more essential, than leak code. And I think this is a huge mistake that people are making.
Yeah, and going back to that two-step process, right? You cannot put I've done 500 leak code problems on your resume.
Hmm.
So if you're stuck on step one, like you can't even get the Fang interview to begin with. It doesn't make any sense to do these DSA problems because the DSA grind is for passing the interview, right? And in order for you to pass the interview, you have to get the call back to begin with. And in this economy, engineers are increasingly not getting any calls back, especially from Fang, right? And
Yeah.
despite this, I see so many engineers like they just got laid off and like they just immediately break out the leak code and start grinding. And I'm like, what are you doing? You got to apply to places first and figure out what you can even get to begin with. And so yeah, let's go to like concretely, moving on to like breaking down the step one, step two thing, right? Figure out where you're struggling. So if you're struggling on step one, you're struggling to get interviews, you're struggling to get your foot in the door. Here are some things that you can do to help with that. The obvious one is optimize your resume. If people are looking at your applications and tossing them out, then there's a good chance your resume kind of sucks, right? Fleshing out your LinkedIn is another one because like not only will people look at your LinkedIn sometimes if a recruiter wants to go extra deep into your profile, but the LinkedIn is very important for inbound. So when it comes to job interview opportunities, there's two types of opportunities. There's outbound and inbound. Outbound is you are sending out an application and hoping they come back to you. Inbound is the recruiter comes to you and goes like, I think you're cool. Please interview with us. And inbound is obviously much better because less effort and they come to you, you feel special. And if you have a really nice LinkedIn, that is a huge factor in whether or not you get inbound. Like for the past like 8 years, I've mostly gotten inbound and I've generally kept my LinkedIn, pretty up to shape. And networking and getting more referrals, that one's like really important. The conversion rate of cold application to getting a call back is very low, especially in this market. So you need a leg up, right? So if you can get a referral, then that really increases your chance of your application actually resulting in like a phone screen or something. It goes from like, 1% or 0.1% to, 5 or 10%. And especially if you can get a really good referral, like a deep referral, like someone has worked with you for years and you've networked with them and you've added a lot of value to them and they consider you as a friend, like that person's going to fight for you, right? Like they're going to refer you, they're going to talk to the hiring manager and be like, hey, this Rahul guy is excellent. He is super nice, writes amazing code. You should definitely give him a phone screen, right? If you can, something I tell a lot of people is if you have a solid bench of people behind you who are willing to fight for you, it is impossible for you to fail in your career, right? If you have that squad behind you who are always willing to go to bat for you, no matter how crappy things are for you in your career and your life, you'll be okay, right? So next one, side projects. That's a big one. That's been a huge one for me for getting inbound. So I'm actually a prolific builder. I just love writing code. So I do it at work. I do it for fun. So ever since college, for the past 11 years, I've been building Android apps for fun on the side. I've published around 30 apps. They've gotten around 5 million users combined. I have multiple apps with over 500K users. And a lot of recruiters from like Uber, Instacart, Google, like Facebook, Block is another one. They've reached out to me because of the side projects. They reach out to my Google Play developer email and offer me interviews. Uber offered to jump me straight to the on-site like 2 or 3 times. They're like, wow, your Android stuff is like super, super good. Want to come in as like a staff Android engineer. And the obvious one is like, if you can't get interviews, just apply to more jobs, take more attempted shots on goal, right? So now we understand like if you're just struggling to get the interviews to begin with, which I'm sure a lot of you in this call are, here are just some of many ideas to, to show yourself up there. Notice how grind leak code is not in this column because it doesn't help you get the interviews. All right, step two. You've gotten the interviews, you have your foot in the door, you have the chance, right? And you're not passing them. You're going in, you're talking to an engineer, they're just not exactly wowed by your skills, and they go like, nope, sorry, but you're not fit to work on this team. In this case, grinding leak code could be the answer, right? If you're going into interviews, they're asking you leak code hard, and you're getting completely annihilated, then it's probably good ROI on your time to just get better at leak code, right? This is when it makes sense to study more leak code. Next one is when it comes to the interview, doing leak code by yourself, just hunched over at your computer late into the night, just like, clicking submit. That single player experience is very different from what the actual experience is, right? In a real interview, you talk to another human. So mock interviews are extremely helpful. And this is another reason why you should like network and make friends. So you can do mocks with them. There is just so much that cannot be captured in single player mode, right? Like that communicating with another person, that stress and anxiety of having someone in front of you, like judging you, right? Like you don't get that when it's just you against the computer, right? When it's you against leetcode.com. So mocks are tremendously helpful. Yeah, better self-care. This is a big one. I see a lot of people on the job hunt and they just let themselves go. They're like doing leak code for like, 8, 10, 12 hours a day. They're not getting good sleep. They're not exercising at all. And that's just like another short-term thing. You can cram in an extra like 2 or 3 hours of studying per day if you're not taking care of yourself, but then you're going to be a complete mess when the interview comes and your brain's just gonna like just poop out. Yeah, deeper introspection. This is a big one. As described before, you should always be reflecting on what's happening. Like, where am I in the process? Where am I struggling? And being honest with yourself about your own flaws. I see so many job candidates, they don't do that. They just kind of float through and they just like, get interviews, they just fail them. And they're not seriously thinking about why that's happening. And they just go, like, oh, on to the next one. And then, yeah, last one, just study more. Just study more in general. If you're going to interviews and they knowledge check you and you don't know some system design thing or you don't have a good story for this behavioral question, then you should just prepare more, right? This one's the obvious one.
And one thing I like that Alex you put together is in a couple slides from now, but you show this kind of conversion funnel of how you go from applications to phone screens to on-sites and so on. And I think the attitude of a lot of people, which I think is the wrong attitude, is that, oh, I have a friend who works at Google or Amazon, so I can skip a lot of the hard work that most people have to do, like LinkedIn, resume optimization, networking, because I have a in. I'm just going to use that and my life is set. But that's a very dangerous way of approaching your job search in this economy in particular, because if you fail that interview, you're back to square one or maybe even square zero because you haven't done any of the other work. And so I think it's dangerous to assume that, oh, I can short circuit this whole thing and just go directly to a step which you haven't earned yet. And I'll talk more about that when Alex, you show the conversion funnel.
Yeah. So just to make things even more clear, when it comes to how you should spend your time, depending on where you are in the process, here's just like some rough examples. You don't need to follow these exactly, but just hope you get the overall idea. So if you're struggling to get interviews, like you're stuck on step one, here I think is like a reasonable way to split up your time. 40% of your time applying to jobs, just taking those shots on goal. And then I think building side projects is a big one because like applying to jobs is so miserable. I do not think you can apply to jobs for 6, 7, 8 hours a day. And I think side projects, number one, boost your portfolio, which I think a lot of people need in this market. Number two, it's really fun. It makes you a better engineer. And then, yeah, networking, just like meeting people, going to conferences, going to in-person in-person meetups or just doing like virtual networking, that's really important for you to, get more referrals, cultivate those relationships. And yeah, I just put 5% on lead code because admittedly, lead code is one of those things where it's easy to build up rust. So you want to make it so that if you do get a FANG interview, you can shake off the rust really quickly, or it's like already mostly gone. So yeah, maybe spending 15, 20 minutes doing like a lead code easy or like a lower end lead code medium per day, that makes sense to me. But yeah, going full on like 3, 4, 5 hours of lead code per day as soon as you go back on the job search, and you have no calls lined up, just doesn't make any sense.
And here's one insight that took me a long time to figure out. But let me tell you the secret of networking. The secret of networking is to be interesting. Okay, if you're interesting and you have very cool things to talk about, I want to talk to you. And so I think that's why I love this pie chart where 35% is allocated to building side projects, because that is how you become interesting. So when I met Alex in 2017 working at Facebook, and he's like, hey, I have built 30 different Android applications. They have 2 million installs. And like literally tens of thousands of people are using my applications and like my Android code every single day. Like, oh, wow, let's be friends. I want to learn more about what you do. And so I think not only is it helpful to like separate out the mind-numbing work of applying to jobs or doing leak code prep, because I don't enjoy that. So building side projects is a way to do something more interesting. But also when you talk to people either in an interview or when you're like sending a cold message on LinkedIn, you become much more attractive to talk to. So I think that's something to keep in mind as the key to networking is just to have something interesting to share.
All right, so now let's move on to, phase two. You have the interviews and now you need to pass them, right? And now your time spent is very different, right? Again, it's very dynamic. You need to be very dynamic to be a great interviewer. So leak code has blown up. We're assuming you've gotten some big tech interviews, right? And obviously when it comes to big tech interviews, you want to make sure you are very well prepared for them, because if you can get a FANG offer, that's great, right? One of the best jobs you can get, right? System design prep. If pretty much if you're not a junior engineer, which most engineers are not junior anymore, system design is really important. Praying for behavioral. Behavioral is also very important. Behavioral is going to be on literally every interview you get, right? Startup, mid-sized company, big tech, they all have behavioral rounds. And then everything from before has shrank, right? So I think networking is always valuable. You should always be doing it. But of course, that slice of the pie has shrunk compared to like phase one. And then side projects has also shrunk, because I think side projects is more for, trying to build up your skills and get the interview. But like once you get the interviews, a lot of interview problems are like kind of made up, right? And you're not actually writing actual code like you were for a side project. So it's not as important. And you should still keep applying, right? You need to have that balance because, it's possible. It's very possible that you get a bunch of interviews and you fail them all, right? So you need to make sure that, in case you fail all of them, you have some stuff teed up. So you should still be applying to jobs, even if you have, some interviews going on, right? So you can see how this pie chart has changed dramatically from phase one, and you have to shift between these two pie charts based on where you are, right? If you get like 10 interviews, but you fail all of them, right? You're back to phase one. You have to go back to that pie chart of before, just like applying to a bunch of places, increasing your networking again, trying to get more referrals and stuff like that. And I think this is what a lot of people, they struggle with. Like they want to be lazy. They want their pie chart to be the same every single week. And that's just not how it works. So the last piece of advice for this particular topic is to track your funnel, because kind of harping on the thread of like, don't be lazy, put in the work. This is something I've seen so many job candidates like not do. And when I try to debug what's happening, they come to me like, Alex, I can't get an offer. I'm getting annihilated in the job search. And I ask them like, what's your funnel? What's your conversion rates? And they're like, oh, I'm not tracking any of that. So what does this mean? So if you expand the entire funnel, right? You start off with top of funnel, which is you're sending applications. And this is oversimplified because a lot of the times an application won't lead to a phone screen. It'll lead to like a take home or something or online assessment. But you want to see how many of those applications convert to you getting to talk to a human, right? And then from of those phone screens, it goes to on-site, and from on-site it goes to offer. And you want to see like at each stage in the funnel, how much is the drop off, right? Like you have 100 phone screens. How many of them are you failing? How many of them are failing to convert to on-site? And then of the on-sites, how many of them, are you failing to get the offer? And the reason this is really important because you need to be able to understand what part of the funnel is unhealthy, right? So you can make it healthy. So the first funnel of application to phone screen, this is arguably the most important one because if your applications aren't going anywhere, there's no point to, grinding lead code and doing all that other stuff, right? Because you're not getting the interviews to begin with. And what I will say is I think a healthy conversion rate is like around 5%. So if you're like below 5%, you're stuck at step one. You're struggling to get interviews because like if you're like 1 or 2% conversion rate, you literally have to send 1,000 applications just to get like 10 or 20 phone screens, right? And that's just insanely weak, right? At that point, you definitely have a problem. Yeah, but once you start getting like 5%, 10%, I think your resume and your LinkedIn and all that other stuff is probably in a good state. And then you can focus on the prep, right? And then you need to figure out like, am I struggling to pass the phone screens and am I struggling to pass the on-sites? Because those two interview types will have like different types of questions, right? And then you'll understand like where your weaknesses. And this is a very basic funnel. I also recommend splitting this funnel by company type. So what does my FANG like big tech type company funnel look like? Like for them, where am I struggling, right? And then how about for startups? Like for startups, what does my funnel look like? Is my conversion rate of application to phone screen higher for startups? Is my conversion rate of phone screen to onsite higher for startups, right? And then, you can go super granular of like, okay, of these interviews, I got like 19 behavioral rounds, 13 system design, and like 25 lead code, right? And then you can assign a score to each one of like, okay, how many of these do I think I did well versus did poorly? And like the important thing is you have this data, right? Like once you have this data, you can systematically debug, like frankly, where you're sucking and then fix that and get better. And it's really not that difficult. Like a spreadsheet will probably do it. Some people just go completely crazy and have like 5 Notions and like 3 Airtables and a bunch of other stuff. But if you have a spreadsheet, that should be enough.
All right, I just launched a quick poll. It might be helpful for everyone on the call to figure out what platforms do you use to actually apply for jobs. So we have the common big companies, LinkedIn, Well-Found, Indeed. So let's see which ones are the most common. And I think that if it's very common, maybe you should try, if you haven't used it, try using it. But it could also be a negative signal in the sense that if you're going to the same place where everyone else is going, then you're competing with a lot more people. And what I tell people when it comes to applications or job interviews in general is figure out your unfair advantage. So figure out where you have access to a company or a hiring manager that other people don't have. So I'll give it like maybe 30 more seconds on this poll. And the last thing I just want to mention here is that yeah, please don't assume that you can skip any part of this funnel. Like I think this happened. I went to Stanford, and so there are some very, how do I put it nicely, like spoiled Stanford kids who are like, I'm going to go directly to the onsite. And I have a really good friend who works at Microsoft. They're going to get me directly on the onsite because they'll advocate for me. And I don't need to do all of the headache or stress of managing the applications or phone screens. I'm just going to get Microsoft. It's my dream company. I'm going to work there. And then, of course, it turns out that they fail the onsite interview. So please don't assume that you can get to the bottom of the funnel without actually doing the hard work of at least thinking about or planning the top of the funnel. All right, Alex, is anything surprising to you about the poll results? It seems like 95% of people use LinkedIn. That's like the default. And the second place is other, or I guess second place is Indeed, actually. So Indeed and LinkedIn are the two most popular.
Yeah, I've actually seen this a lot. A lot of people don't know what well-found or AngelList is, which like especially in this economy is like you're it's being slept on. Well, that's a discussion for like another time. But yeah, people just Google well-found engineering jobs.
Yeah.
You'll thank me later. But yeah, we can move on.
Okay. All right. So topic number 2 out of 3, and these next two I think should be a little bit quicker. Having the right mentality when it comes to interviewing. So let me start off by just saying that when Alex and I started Taro, the gap that we noticed in the market was that we felt like there were so many people who were talking about the tactics. Okay, here's how you learn this algorithm, or here is the explanation of this for loop, or what this code is doing. And I think everyone here is smart. You're going to figure that out. Whether you have I mean, having a tutor or a teacher will help, but you could also figure it out on your own. A lot of the meta level approach to how do I think about my job search, that is, I think, more critical and less talked about. And so that's like our whole goal with Taro is rather than focusing on the minutia of a particular tactic, we're going to talk about the mentality and approach to a topic. And I want to do this while being practical, right? So it's not just like I'm gonna like theorizing something pie in the sky. I want to give you a very grounded approach to how you should be thinking when you're talking to an interviewer, for example. Okay. So here's the key takeaway. Don't, when you walk into an interview, whether it's a phone screen or on-site, don't view that interview as a make or break opportunity. Even if you really feel like you're desperate for this job, you're on a visa, you might get kicked out of the country, the stakes are high. That's true. But don't actively think about it when you're going into the interview. A much healthier way of viewing the interaction with any company is, hey, this is a really wonderful opportunity for me to learn from very talented people and share my own opinion or have a discussion with them. So I think that the takeaway here is that when you put that much pressure on yourself, then mentally you won't be as sharp. Like you're going to be so high strung, and that will typically lead to a lack of confidence, and a lack of confidence will lead to a poor interview performance. So the thing to remember is that when you walk in and say, "Hey, I'm just going to enjoy this," it's a high pressure situation. I'm going to try and enjoy. I'm going to walk in and have this opportunity to learn from someone super smart, and that will counterintuitively help you perform better. And I'll draw a parallel here because now Alex and I, we are founders, we're entrepreneurs. Let me draw a parallel. This exact lesson is equally or more applicable when you start a company. So I imagine many people here are thinking about at some point in their life doing a company. When you talk to a venture capitalist, if it comes off that you're desperate and you really, really want this venture capitalist to invest in you and you really need the money, guess what? Almost certainly you will not get money from them. Right? The best way to get investment from a venture capitalist is to show them that you don't need them. Have leverage, like talk to 20 or 100 VCs. And then if one or two invest, that's great. But the attitude you should have is that I don't need you. And that's, I think, how you actually win in the VC game. So a similar analogy applies here. Don't go into the interview feeling like this is the best or only company you can work at. So here's the kind of before and after. Okay, if you're stressed out, I really need this. It's going to change my life. I really want to work at Microsoft or Google or whatever company it is. And then when you start thinking like that, you know, I've had this happen to me where it's like an hour before the interview, I'm like driving over there or whatever. I'm like, oh shoot, there was that one question on Glassdoor that I totally forgot how to do. Like, was it breadth first search or depth first search? I totally forgot. And you start panicking. It's like, oh, what if that question comes up? And then you also start to think about the consequences of failing. So, wow, there's like a 1 year cooldown period. That means I won't be able to work at my dream company for a whole year, and my life will suck. And that's usually not true. The better way of approaching it is, hey, I've never talked to an engineer at Microsoft before or at this startup before. What a cool opportunity for me to learn from them. I'll get other interviews if I fail this one. And I like this last one a lot, which is, hey, this is a learning opportunity for whether or not I succeed or fail the interview. I will learn something from it, and then I'll turn out to be a better engineer. Then I'll take that lesson and improve myself going forward. That's a really healthy way of approaching the interview.
Yeah, just to add on here, like Rahul and I, even in this terrible market, we have coached and mentored engineers to getting like 5+ offers in this economy, like FANG offers. And something Rahul and I noticed was that all of those people were extremely chill. Like you would think that if they have like 5 FANG interviews lined up in this market, they'd be extremely stressed out. But like you wouldn't even think that they had that much on the line at that moment, like given the success of having a job interview process. And when it comes to the best tech companies who have the best interviewers, who have the best perception of like, social skills, body language, people can sense desperation. It's like a shark with a blood in the water. Like if someone is just so desperate, it rubs off in a negative way and people can see. And I saw this because I did a bunch of interviews at Meta. I interviewed over 100 engineers at Meta. And the people who were just so anxious and desperate, like I felt bad for them, but they were pretty bad at interviewing. They were just so high strung, they're like glass cannon. Whenever I ask them like a remotely tricky follow-up question, they would just collapse, right? And the people who do the best are just they're almost like Zen. They're just like, yeah, I'm just gonna go in and do my best, just hang out with some smart people and just see what happens, and they get like five offers. It's very counterintuitive, right? It's almost like they don't care. They're playing like hard to get, and that's what makes companies want them. And this was actually the case for me. And I kind of discovered this kind of mental trick on accident because when I was doing my first job search as a UCLA new grad, I was a really bad interviewer. And I failed like 10, 15 on-sites. And I was just like, FML, I hate my life. I'm just going to stop caring. I just go in and get crushed. I'm going to stop caring. I'm just going to go in and just do whatever. And just, I'm going to do my best. And then, whatever happens, happens. And when I had that mentality of like, meh, I'll just do whatever. I actually started passing interviews. It was really weird. Right? So I kind of stumbled upon this on accident. Yeah, but like once you go in with this like much more relaxed mentality, like you're just gonna find yourself doing things you didn't even realize your brain was capable of because your brain is gonna be much more better at adapting if you're just more chill.
Yeah, and one more life hack I want to share very concretely. In 2017, I made the decision to leave Pinterest and I did a very thorough job search and I ended up with 6 offers. And I think I had 8 on-site interviews. And Alex, I think I've told you a story, but there was one week where I took a whole week off Pinterest and I had 5 back to back to back to back on-site interviews at like Uber, Stripe, Facebook, Google, like literally Monday through Friday, every day there was a different company that I was interviewing at. And so I'm not gonna lie, like it was a bit busy and like I was like high strung, I guess. But the thing is that I didn't have the opportunity to care that much about any one company. Because like, oh, I have Monday is like Uber, Tuesday I have to start worrying about or thinking about the next company. And so that's another reason why I think having that really methodical funnel and like applying to a bunch of companies is good, is that you don't get so hell bent on any one company. Because if you do that, I think usually it's counterproductive. It's better just to do a lot of companies so that you can't panic too much. Okay. Um, this is like a very rough way of illustrating what happens when you're so panicked. Is that okay? If you in practice, when you're like doing leak code on your own, you feel good, you're well rested, you just had dinner, then you can bang them out really well. Like you have a really high accuracy rate, you can solve them quickly. And then it turns out when you go into the the actual interview and there's someone watching you, you totally mess up. You have a bad mentality, you cram, you can't sleep the night before, everything just goes badly. And then you remember about 25% of what you actually truly know, and therefore you fail. Okay, contrast that with the other approach, which is, hey, you're going to go in, you're going to learn, you're going to talk to smart people, like everything we talked about. Then you're going to retain much, much more of what you actually prepared. So you are able to have an actual two-way conversation with the interviewer rather than feeling like you're being grilled. You're able to work through unexpected problems and just be nimble. And I think a lot of interview success boils down to being nimble and having an actual conversation. Okay, so with that, the takeaway I want you to remember for the mentality part of this presentation is study a lot, care a little. Yeah, of course, you need to do the hard work of actually networking and doing leak code and grinding out DSA. But when it comes time to the actual evaluation, then trust the process, trust what work you've done, and don't be so attached to the outcome. One way I like to describe it is be input driven, not output driven. So the inputs are the time you spend, the structure you have for studying, and the output is did the interviewer like you that day? And yeah, there is something you can do to control that, but there's also a lot that's not in your control. They might have a bad day, the company might have reduced their headcount for whatever reason, and you can't really care that much because it's not in your control. Okay, last section, cold messages and how much time should we all spend sending cold messages to people? Alex, I'll let you take this.
Yeah, I like this one. So, moving on to the next slide here, the immediate message I want to get through is cold messaging is not a magical silver bullet. And a lot of people want it to be, but it's just not because of the next point. It does not take a genius to do a LinkedIn search for recruiter at X bank company or guess a corporate email based on the name, like the name of the recruiter on LinkedIn. right? And the people who are just desperately sending out like hundreds of cold messages, what I found with those people is it generally masks a deeper issue of poor network. They don't have that bench of people who are willing to fight for them, right? And that is, an example of the laziness that is now getting punished in this economy. In the prior economy, the good economy, the ZIRP economy, you could get away with having a bad network, but not anymore. And yeah, cold messages almost never work for the companies that engineers want it to work for. In particular, engineers want it to work for the big dogs, right? They want it to work for Fang and like the fresh IPOs, like the Airbnbs and the Ubers, right? But it just doesn't work for those companies, and we'll cover that more later. But cold messages are not useless. They actually can work in certain scenarios. So, we're going to teach you like when cold messages actually work. So, when do they actually work? There's kind of two main conditions. Number one, the company is on the smaller side. I always say less than 250 employees. Once you start getting to like 250, 500,000 employees, like there's always a small chance that the cold message will work, but there's a correlation between the company size and the success rate of the cold message, right? The bigger the company, the lower the success rate. The smaller the company, the higher the success rate. So it's inverse correlation. So that's the first kind of criteria for cold message success. The second one is you aren't lazy with it, which is a big one. Again, like lazy cold messages are just a complete waste of time. You might as well just save the 30 to 60 seconds and just do like a cold application. So let's dig into, each of these kind of criteria. So I have another meme after this. I was born to work for Google. I've seen people message me, like, other Fang engineers, Fang recruiters. They have this life story about like how, I was totally born to work for Google. I was totally born to work for Facebook, and it's just like, no, you weren't. Okay. No one was born to work for some $2 trillion like late stage capitalism conglomerate. Okay. Like you just want to work here because it's a prestigious company that pays you a lot of money. And that's totally fine. If that's your reason for working there, that's fine. But like wasting all this time faking this narrative about like how you like truly love the company and you were born to work for the company, this is a waste of time. And just statistically, like these Fang engineers and Fang recruiters, they're getting billions of these messages. So how can they tell if yours, like let's say you actually do genuinely believe you were born to work for Google, like they're not gonna believe you, right? There's like 500 other people saying the exact same thing. Right? This is why you have this meme. There's all the Buzz Lightyear. They all think they're special because they're Buzz Lightyear, hero of the universe. And then there's like a billion of them. So let's kind of contrast, right? Kind of like, okay, the smaller companies have higher chance, usually startups. Startups have comparatively little hiring power. They don't have 5,000 people applying to their job postings in the first 24 hours like it is for Fang in this economy, right? Passion for their product is extremely important. When you only have 5 or 10 or 15 engineers, you actually need all of them to care about the product. Google does not care if you care about Google because they have 50,000 engineers. And if like, a bunch of them are jaded, that's okay. They have this well-oiled machine, they'll be fine. Not the case for startups. A lot of the founders and execs will do the hiring. So it's very common, like for a Series A startup, the VP of engineering will like own the hiring loop. Like they will just like put hours and hours into hiring and just like work alongside the recruiter. And that's a really cool personal touch that you can leverage. The next thing for startups is they can do a lot of stuff like ad hoc. Like they can jump you straight to the on-site, like stuff like that. They can write a custom interview for you. They can make exceptions. They can like read your cold messages, right? Like I'm sure a lot of Fang recruiters like barely even read their LinkedIn inbox. This is probably just like annihilated. And a very important thing for startups is they're willing to take bets on talent. And for a lot of you in this market, you are going to be someone that company needs to take a bet on because companies know that in this market they have their pick of the litter, especially the Fang companies. If I'm like a Netflix recruiter and I post like an L4 job posting, I'm gonna get like a million super qualified engineers applying the next day, right? But that's not going to be the case for most startups. So, they're willing to take people with some quirky backgrounds who are not so proven because, again, they don't have as much hiring power. So look like a big tech. Instead of the little like sapling in the ground, they're like the mighty tree. They have incredible hiring power, right? They have all this prestige. Like I know Fang recruiters and they're like, oh my God, Ali, I just posted this job posting on LinkedIn. I work at Google, like literally 2,500 applications in the first 24 hours. It's insane, right? And same thing, it doesn't really matter if you're not that passionate about the product for big tech, which also means that if you are genuinely passionate about the product for big tech, they don't really care. Yeah, the recruiter is completely slammed. They just have way too many applications and not enough hours in the day. So they can only devote a tiny, tiny micro piece of attention to each candidate. And everything has to be standardized for big tech, right? It's just like a well-oiled machine. It's hard for them to make exceptions, right? And they're also very, very conservative with hiring because they can be, right? They have their pick of the litter. If they have to choose between a candidate who is not super proven, which is a lot of engineers in this economy, they've never worked for a FANG company before, it's not clear if they'll succeed in like the rigor of big tech. Companies are going to turn down these candidates overwhelmingly, especially in this market for the most part, because they're just going to hire the laid off FANG engineer to work for their FANG company, right? And that is very, very hard to overcome. So, just in general, I think if you've never worked for a big tech company before, I would just temper your expectations because it's going to be very hard for you to break in. So, when it comes to the tactics of cold messaging, going down that second point of like, don't be lazy with it. Here's an example of being lazy with it. So, Taro is a company that, Rahul and I founded. We help engineers like we are doing with this talk right now. And I get easily 3 to 5 of these messages per day asking me for a job as a software engineer at Taro. And they mostly look like this. So if we go through this, right, I love what you're doing on Taro. I think it's super cool. That's this generic fluff. They clearly haven't tried the product, right? This is something that you can just replace Taro with any product, right? I can put it like Anthropic or OpenAI or Airbnb, right? This is not customized at all. I would love to work there, have a self-starter, and I've built lots of incredible software teams. I know C, C++, Java, Python, and Kubernetes. Like this is just like a laundry list of technical skills, right? Another sign that is purely copy pasted. We're actually pretty open about our tech stack, like on LinkedIn. Like we've posted our tech stack before, right? If people did a little bit of research, they could find this out. And we're obviously not like we're not at a scale where we need to use Kubernetes, right? So it just shows that this person like they're lazy with it. They haven't done the work to actually like show that they care about the product. And yeah, this is classic like this is something that engineers struggle with a ton with like their resume, with the interview process in general, is telling, not showing. So they say these things of like, I'm awesome, like, I'm a self-starter. I've built cool stuff. I can collaborate with teams. And they have no proof of that. So this is just, this message is just pretty much, it has a bunch of words, but is not actually saying anything. So I just delete these immediately.
And I'll share one more example here. So here's another one. I posted about this on LinkedIn actually. So LinkedIn has a brand new feature where they're using generative AI to draft a cold message to people. And this is a very scary thing. We live in the world of AI now. Everyone can, the message that Alex just posted, in the next year or 2 years, that will be multiplied by an order of magnitude because it'll be so easy for anyone to be lazy now because you just click a button and that word vomit will come out. So here's an example where Charlie is our like basically head of engineering or founding engineer at Taro. Hope you're well. I noticed that you work at Taro, YCS22. So this is like a dead giveaway of this being a script, which is wrote this like an AI or a copy paste that wrote this because the Taro company name on LinkedIn has YCS22 in parentheses. So there's actually something interesting that I didn't put together in my head until recently. If you all have seen a person's name on LinkedIn and it has an emoji in it, like it has like a growth emoji or a skeleton emoji, can you give me a thumbs up on Zoom? Just like tell me if you know what I'm talking about. Where like people, their name actually says like smiley face or something. So I learned that the reason why people do that is that becomes a dead giveaway that a recruiter or a salesperson is copy pasting their display name on LinkedIn because no one actually has an emoji in their actual name, right? And so the fact that you are like putting in the whatever smiley face emoji when you're saying, hi, Tom, smiley face, it means that you just kind of copied. It's not a human written message. So that's what's happening here. Like LinkedIn generated this text, which is clearly like copy pasted from the name of the company. And then there's also some really suspect text here where like this is impersonating me. So I've also taught an engineering course for ambitious professionals, and it gives the full name of the course that I taught. And this is all accurate, but a human would not, I would not write like this. Most humans would not write like this. It sounds like an AI. And then you same as what Alex commented on before. I'm energized by your company's mission, and I believe I can contribute positively to the team. Come on. Like, this is just like, you could literally put that message in any outreach to anyone. And so this is, again, a really good example of a bad cold message. So please don't do this. And I mean, I'm not dunking on AI. I kind of am, but you can use AI, but then make sure you modify whatever is given to you and make it human. Like AI is good, I think, to get over the blank page syndrome, where like it's daunting to look at a blank page and like generate the initial draft. The AI can help with that. But once you have that initial draft, you need to really go through in detail and figure out how you can make it much more personal.
Okay, so we've talked about crappy cold messages. Let's look at a good cold message. So, let's look at this one. It's another person messaging me about working for Taro. Thank you so much for building Taro. Your career advice there helped me, land my first job. I loved your new course about work-life balance. Do you have plans to add closed captioning to courses? Anyways, if you're looking for another web dev, I'm interested. I would love to make Taro better. So the immediate thing to notice is they've clearly used the product. Like they know Taro is a product that helps engineers by giving them quality career advice. So this shows to me they've at least spent 5 minutes to use the product. And again, this is like not a low bar to clear. I just want people to not be lazy, right? If you just put in the extra 5 or 10 minutes of effort, it makes your cold message literally 20x better, 100x better. Do you have plans to add closed captioning to courses? It shows that they've already analyzed the product and they're already almost thinking like a product manager, right? They're like, if I were to run this product, how would I make it better? Right. And I have found a lot of people getting interviews at top startups like OpenAI, who are, when they deployed like the early days of OpenAI, now they're probably completely slammed with like messages, but like just showing that you are already thinking like an employee, like a productive employee trying to improve the product. You're already showing that as a job candidate, right? That's a good sign that if I were to hire this person, they at least care about the product. And that's very valuable in a startup. Yeah, very powerful, finale. And I'm interested. I would love to make Tarbra. And the reason it's powerful is because of the buildup, right? Instead of telling, instead of showing, they're showing instead of telling. They've shown they've put in the work of like trying the product, thinking through it, exercising their product sense, and trying to envision a world where Taro is an even better product, having more impact, right? So that makes the final sentence really powerful. It kind of wraps it all up. It's like the nice little bow on top of the gift, right? As opposed to the previous cold message where they have something similar, but it's just completely empty, right? Because there's no weight behind it. There's no proof behind it that they actually care about Taro, right? So this is an example of really good cold message. And I know a lot of engineers who, they just spend like this extra 5, 10, 15 minutes, trying the products, putting themselves in like the CEO chair to see how they improve the product, and they write a message like that, and their conversion rate is 5, 10, 25x higher than the people sending the lazy cold messages. So green check, this is a great cold message. And kind of the overall tactic here, my recommendation is with cold messages is you obviously cannot write a cold message like this for every company. I think in this economy, you just have to take a lot of shots on goal and apply it to a lot. I think a lot of engineers in this market are going to have to apply to 500, 1,000, or maybe even 2,000 plus jobs before they get a good offer that they can take. And there's no way you can spend 10, 15 minutes writing a cold message for all 2,000 of those applications, right? That's impossible. And a lot of your applications will be to those big companies where these messages are pretty much useless anyways. I think it's much better to just cold apply to the bigger companies and try to get a referral. But yeah, for of those like 1,000 companies or whatever, there's going to be like 5 or 10% of those companies where number one, it's a smaller company. It's like a startup, like Series A or B or earlier. And number two, you actually do have genuine passion for the mission of the company. And when those two things intersect, do this, like write that high effort cold message. And then for all the other companies that don't satisfy those conditions, either you don't really care about the product and you're just like a job to job, or the company is like huge, then just don't write a cold message, right? It's just not worth your time.
I like to connect a lot of what we're talking about to broader lessons in my life that I've learned. And I think cold messaging is a good one because if you think about a cold message, there is some cost in the sense that it's like 5 or 10 minutes of your time, but there's not like a monetary cost. There's nothing else aside from your time. And so that cost is kind of fixed. It's like 5 or 10 minutes. But the outcome, if it works well, it could be enormous. Like you could literally get a job, you could make a really good connection that might become a co-founder or like a really trusted collaborator. But there's so much to be gained. So when you find something like this, where there's an asymmetric opportunity, where for a fixed amount of cost or time or money, you could have an amazing outcome, it is usually worthwhile to really invest in that. And especially in the world of AI, where there's so many really low quality cold messages, your ability to be human and to say something insightful or say something more personal when you do that outreach will make you a much, much stronger candidate and will increase the likelihood of you actually getting the outcome you want. Okay, that is it. So those are the three takeaways. I'll do my best right now in like a minute to summarize what we talked about. Okay. So actionable takeaways. Number one, we talked about how do you organize your job search so you don't waste time. In particular, be really clear about, are you in step one, which is about um, networking and preparing to apply for jobs? Or are you in step two, which is you actually got the interview and now you're preparing for the interview, you're doing lead code. Takeaway number two is have the right mentality to avoid the pressure that will hurt your interview performance. So study a lot, care a little. And then takeaway number three is that cold messages work for smaller companies if you are not lazy about it. So invest in it properly, write like a human, and make a genuine connection. And if you play a long-term game, cold messages actually have a huge amount of value and impact. I'll say one more thing actually that I forgot to mention earlier. One of the habits of some of the best people I've ever worked with is they will send cold messages to people who they find interesting with no actual incentive or motivation to gain anything. And that has so much more value, right? So it's like, hey, I attended a conference or I like found a talk on YouTube. I'm going to send a cold message to that person and say, I loved your talk. It was so cool. And I thought that your concept of this was really insightful. I'm going to try to apply that. Like, nope, you're not asking for a referral. You're not asking for time on their calendar. You're just saying, hey, that was super cool. If you do that and you make it a habit where like every week you send one cold message to someone you are inspired by, I can guarantee within 1 year, you will have a life-changing outcome. So I want you to try that. Okay. If you all do it for one cold message to someone who is helpful for you or like who you think is cool, and you do that every week for a year, you will have a really amazing outcome. So that's like one very actionable thing you all could try. Okay. Alex, anything to add before we dive into the closing remarks?
Yeah, so there's two big things that's going to happen. Number one, we're going to go through how you can go even deeper into sharpening your job search. Like you should. Like this market is so bad. Like we talked for about 45, 50 minutes. For most of you, it's not going to be enough. There's like a lot. There's so many things that happen underneath the hood that you have to get right in order to succeed in this market. So we'll cover that. And then after that, we'll take questions.
Okay, perfect. So we talked for about, I guess, more than we thought, but we talked for about 50 minutes, right? We covered three really core concepts that I think are really valuable, but there's no way that we could cover everything that we want to in 50 minutes, right? And that's why Alex has spent literally, I think, how much was it? Like 60 hours of time. And I reviewed the outline. Alex did a ton of work in putting together a really high quality course. So Alex, I'll let you talk about what this entailed or what's in this course.
Yeah, so it was probably closer to 100 hours worth of work. And this is kind of the synthesis of, well, first of all, everything I've learned, doing interviews, primarily everything I've learned failing interviews and coaching, thousands of engineers and debugging like, okay, why do you suck, frankly? Like, why are you sucking? And I've compiled it all into this course. So yeah, what we just went through is just a slice of this course. This course is like almost 5 hours long. It goes through, how to deal with cover letters. It goes through how to optimize your resume. It goes through the interview types like behavioral, DSA, practical coding. It goes through the differences between startup and big tech interviews. It goes through pretty much everything. And if you need that extra leg up, then I highly recommend taking this course. We've already seen really great results with it already. This course has been out for a while now. I would say like around a month. And a lot of engineers have gone through it and actually gotten offers already with the help of this course. So yeah, highly recommend. And yeah, this is what it takes to survive in this market. Like again, in the prior economy, it was 0% interest and jobs were just being handed out like candy left and right. You could get away with just like not knowing a lot of stuff and like just frankly being lazy with a lot of stuff. Not the case anymore.
Yeah, so I counted actually, Alex. There are 38 parts in the course that you made. There's 6 different modules. And if you liked what you saw today, almost everything we presented today is actually from the course. So it's just like more of a more complete, thorough guide of what you saw a preview of today. So here's the other thing I want to mention is that, I really believe in the value of this course, and I think it can really be helpful. But I'm not going to promise that you're going to find a job after 4 hours of taking the course. There's a lot of it's going to take time. You're going to probably fail a couple interviews. You're going to feel demoralized. There's a lot that has to happen before you actually land the job that you want. Okay, so we're not promising you that it's going to happen immediately. But what I do promise is that we'll try and be there to help you, right? That's the whole point of Taro. And so one of the best parts about Taro is that we have an awesome community of people. So here's 2 sample events that happened recently, and they happen every so often. I think like every couple of weeks, every month.